What's up YouTube? Shamu Aquariums here, bringing you guys another video. And before I get to the main part of the video that I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about the little update to my 135 gallon aquarium here. As you can see, this side of the tank looks a bit different, as last night I noticed one of my pieces of driftwood with my Anubias attached to it had been knocked over. So I went in there, and as I was messing with the wood, I realized that a couple of my large Anubias had separated off into separate plants. So I left it for the night, and then this morning while I was doing my water change, I got in there and spread out the newly separated pieces and put them in their own little spots. So now this part of the tank is less bare, and I'm actually kind of liking it this way. And as you guys know, like 3 or 4 weeks ago, I got rid of my big Pleco, and I sent his big log cave with him. Now, on to the main part of the video I was going to talk about. Now, both on YouTube, but mainly Facebook, I have had a lot of people tell me how they like my roseline sharks, also known as Denison barbs, but the only reason they don't have any is because they think they're too expensive, on top of the fact that they like to be in groups of 5 or more. Now, I do agree with them that roseline sharks are pretty pricey. Now, I know a lot of you discus keepers out there are probably laughing at me right now, but let me see if I can get more of them to come over here. But yeah, these guys can be a little expensive. Like when they're juveniles, like around 1.5 to 2 inches long, they go for like 10 to 15 bucks in my area. And I've heard some people say that they go for like 20 bucks in their area. Now, when I was younger, when I was a teenager, when I wasn't working yet and completely depending on my parents, what I would do is I would, instead of buying a whole school of like 7 or 8 of them at a time, I would just buy like 3 at a time. And then the next time I got some like birthday money or Christmas money, or whenever my dad was willing to take me out to the local fish store to buy me some fish, I would just add a few more. And I would slowly build up the school from there. And then flash forward to when I was 18 and I was finally working, I would get my paycheck. Now, when I was working at Walmart, my wages were not the best and my hours were not the best either. But when I would get my paycheck, I would buy a few, and then on the next paycheck, or another paycheck like a month or two later, I would get a few more. And I would slowly build up the school from there until I had like a good school of like 7 to 9 of them. Now that I'm more financially stable, like I have been buying them in like larger numbers. Like back in February, I started this group off with 7 of them. I bought 7 of these roselines in one transaction, and that consisted of 5 juveniles and 2 like medium-sized ones that were like 4 inches long. Now this is back in February, and you can see how big these guys are now. And those 7 roselines that I got, the 2 larger ones and the 5 juveniles, the juveniles were $15 a piece, and the 2 larger ones were $30 a piece. So that was like $140 worth of roselines that I bought in one transaction, and that was the first time I've ever done that. Normally I was used to buying like 2 or 3 at a time. So I almost had a heart attack at the cash register that day, but luckily I'm financially stable now. And then a couple weeks later, my dad walked through the front door with this big ass one. And this roseline, when my dad walked through the front door with him, he was already 5 inches long. And my dad said, "You owe me $55. You're welcome." Like, my dad literally just went out to pick up some fish food for me, and then he walked through the front door with that big ass roseline and surprised me. But I still had to pay him back the $55 that the roseline cost plus the fish food. Yeah. And then that big ass roseline, $55 fucking dollars for that 5-inch roseline. If I were at the fish store myself, I personally wouldn't have bought it, but my dad walked in with them and surprised me. Now, flash forward to like the end of April, I decided to add like 4 more. They were like $12 each, juveniles. And then, like within the last week or so, I added a 13th one to my group. And like, I'll get to that in another video, but that new one that I just added to my tank was an impulse purchase because I thought it was as big as the ones I have in here. Turns out he's a lot smaller. My eyes kind of fooled me at the fish store. But anyway, the reason why I also like buying schools of fish in like separate transactions, like months apart, is because I personally like schools better when some of them are big and some of them are small. Now, also, when you buy these fish, I do recommend just buying them as juveniles because it's cheaper that way. They're already expensive enough when they're small, and they get ridiculously expensive when they're bigger. And they grow pretty fast. Like the 5 juveniles that I got back in February, they were 2.5 inches long when I got them. Flash forward 6 months later, it is August now. They have grown from 2.5 inches all the way up to 4 to 4.5 inches in only 6 months. So they grow pretty quick. Now, once they reach that 4.5, 5-inch mark, their growth rate does slow down significantly. But to go from 2 inches to 4 inches in like only 6 months or less, that's pretty good, and it's worth it. Now, the group of 13 that I have in here, I categorize them as my 2 large ones that are like 5 inches long, my 6 medium ones that are 4 to 4.5 inches long, and then my 5 juveniles that are like 3 to 3.5 inches long. And that's how I like my schools to be, when they're all different sizes rather than all being the same size and all looking the same. Now, keep in mind, the younger ones are still growing. Even my 2 largest ones are not fully grown yet, but they're gonna slowly creep up to that 5.5, 6-inch mark because their growth rate does slow down a lot once they get to that 4.5, 5-inch mark, but they will slowly creep up to about 5.5, 6 inches. I am hoping that some of them will get bigger than 6 inches, but that's very unlikely. They typically max out at 6 inches. But I need a vape rip real quick. Now, yeah, eventually as the smaller ones get bigger, they will catch up to the larger ones in size, and eventually they will all be around the same size. But I do think it will be pretty impressive when I have a large school of big ass roselines in here, when they're all at around that 5.5, 6-inch mark. And even right now, the size gaps are shrinking down. Like, my smaller ones are catching up to the bigger ones, and it's amazing how fast these fish grow. Now, like I said before, don't be afraid to try these fish out. I know they can be pricey. Just buy a few at a time and slowly build up the school from there. And in the end, it will be worth it, especially when they're all different sizes, because it does look a lot better when they're like, some of them are big and some of them are small, rather than all being the same size and looking just like each other. Now, this big one, dead center here, he is my largest one. He's going up towards the top now. He's my largest and best looking one. That is why he's my favorite, and that's why I post a lot of pictures of him on Facebook. And when I do like my, like, what do you call it? Compilation? No, compilation is for videos. But when I do my big, like, when I post a bunch of pictures, like photo dumps, when I do my big Roseline shark photo dumps on Facebook, on the Facebook groups, a lot of people on there notice that a lot of those pictures are the same exact Roseline, and that's just simply because I think that that one big Roseline is the best looking one and all the others are ugly. And that's because that big Roseline has the best colors on him, because he has that fully mature, like, green coloration on his back. You probably can't see it that well from this distance, but he is the supermodel of my Roseline shark school. Now the fat one that you see towards the left, he actually used to be, he's one of the 4.5 inch Roselines that I got back in February, and he actually caught up to the big guy. And I actually think that pretty soon he's going to be bigger than the big guy, and pretty sure it's a female too, and females do get bigger. But yeah, don't be afraid to try these fish out. I know they're a bit pricey, but they're worth it. Just if you think they're too expensive, don't just try to buy like 7 or 8 of them all at the same time. Just start with a few, and then you're on your next paycheck, or like a couple months later, add a few more, and in the end you will have a nice big school of Roselines. But yeah, that's all for today's video. So like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.